Alright, draft physics video should be working, hopefully. So Steve Bro has done the first part, or some part of the experiment. But yeah, I don't think it's I don't think it's of enough precision for the level of the thing that's got to be detected. So they're, he's a matter of 3 feet away, detecting a weak signal. And so he didn't detect any higher frequency, but there's two. The whole idea of this frequency thing, you can sort of understand that when two frequencies overlap, they're not going to be, at first, when they're starting to overlap, they're going to be a very tight frequency in the middle there, and then a bigger frequency on the outside. It's not an even doubling. It doesn't go from this to perfectly between the two. So it's not going to go from 8 gigahertz to 16 gigahertz. It's going to go through a whole bunch of transitions. So the 16 is going to be at a very precise location where it's going to be the cleanest. And as you've pointed out, your frequency reader is kind of sensitive to any modulation, any imperfectness in the frequency. So obviously this could be 30 gigahertz in the middle here, and this one could be 12. It could be some other lower number. It's made up of an inconsistent frequency. So you really can't hand hold it, and maybe you can, but you should have to find the spot, and it's only going to be in one spot. It's going to be a pretty narrow range that's going to have the perfect overlap, the perfect destructive interference. The second problem is obviously the frequency reader. It needs the higher the frequency, the more difficult it is to read. So obviously it needs a better signal at the higher frequency to be able to read it. So it's not going to detect a weaker, higher frequency. So right there's another reason not to think that this experiment is definitive in any way. It's information, but yeah, I just don't, it's just not enough information. So anyway, my point is that I think you should start, as I suggested, with the simple experiment, where you just have the two guns separately, so you can run them off the same power source, but it doesn't matter if they're in phase, and just have them across from each other, and then you just put a nail or some kind of metal in the middle, and all you're going to try to do is detect the out of phaseness by moving all you have to do is move one of them, and you should be able to change the phase. So if you run two guns off one power source, they should be in phase, presumably. But again, I don't think it shouldn't probably matter, as long as they're consistent. As long as they're not changing phase or have irregular phase, then you should be able to do this same experiment by just moving one of them, and you should be able to get the interference pattern. And ideally, if you just have a nail and you just measure the voltage, you should be able to do the same thing. And then if you can't measure the voltage, then you can hook it up to your frequency counter and see if you can detect the frequency. But I wouldn't have done the double horn one as the first experiment. And I'm not suggesting you get exposed to microwaves as stated. I mean, you could just set it up so you can stand 10 feet away and then turn it on. But whatever, you sound like you're finding it all tedious and taxing, and I didn't. I'm not obligating you. If you're just not interested anymore, it's fine. Somebody else will come along. I mean, there's other people who have this stuff with this equipment and stuff, so it's got to be a doable experiment. But yeah, I mean, there's, you barely hacked it to get it to work, and you're saying you have enough results to say, well, it's discouraging and time to move on. That's fine. I just I don't think so. So that's all I can say to it. And maybe in the future I'll just do it with like I said, even conventional microwaves ought to work. Technically. I mean, anything that's producing a consistent signal. Like I said, they shouldn't even have to be in phase. Just two signals. You should be able to detect it. Anyway. So, I'll do some comments. And such. Alright, moving down the list. Okay, I mean they're really kind of irritating comments. Alright, I think we're done. Okay, we're down in here somewhere. I could be wrong about this, but I think when the blue and green waves are out of phase, phase cancellation happens. So yeah, that's what everybody believes, that somehow photons interfere with each other. Fine, but they don't. And that's why the red line goes to 0 amplitude at the point in the animation. The red line, these are not real lines. They weren't hooked up to some instrument or something. It's not a simulation. It's a stupid animation. All right? There's nothing real in the animation. It's just representing two waves and representing that when the two waves are in phase, there's constructive interference, which no one's disagreeing with. That's the two photons in, two photons out. That's perfectly sensible. The part that makes no sense is where there's no red line illustrating anything, where two photons go in and no photon comes out. And you're just ignoring the argument that fundamentally there's no photon. The photons move to a different location. So obviously in the two-slit experiment, obviously I don't think they move in the radar experiment. Thus you don't get addition of frequencies, just removing them. Thus you don't get addition of frequencies, just removing of them. Whatever that means, removing of what? Also just speculating, but I think even when two waves with differing frequencies interact, it's just all this, again, people can say this wave shit all you want. There's just no evidence of it. Doesn't make any sense. Waves in what? Waves of what? What is your medium? What's the binding substance that's allowing you to wave it? I mean, it's just these free waves. This just doesn't make any sense. It's flying pigs. I mean, you're saying that you're giving properties to things that can't have those properties. All right, you just get the addition of them, like 1 hertz plus 1 hertz, not an increase of a single wave to 2 hertz. Says you. So I mean, that's the whole argument here, right? So he says you with no evidence that it isn't true, but okay, just keep saying there's no overlap. When I'm saying, quite obviously, there are overlaps in sound waves. They do create new frequencies. Okay. So Tom Spencer left a link to a couple of Khan Academy videos. So eventually I'll play those because they are funny. Because they're so wrong. Alright. Let's see. About the possible book recommend learning about the basic underlying electrical science. Basically your response was, as I feared. Okay, yeah. There's no source of truth. Experiments are a great thing. So yes. Pay attention to the experiments. But don't pay attention to what they say the experiment is doing. Look at it and see if you think that's what it's really doing. Suppose I'll just have to keep using my best judgment, sifting through various sources, keeping a skeptical frame of mind in the process. These DraftScience videos are definitely one of sources for explanation of how the associated mechanisms essentially work. Well, I'm just suggesting a mechanism, which is, yes, a lot more than they're doing. because they're suggesting a wooeyism. I am a neophyte noob, and because of that I'm sure some would claim I'm foolish for deeming an unofficial source as unworthy of examination. Well, again, the source is the material. I'm not a source of, I'm only a source of pointing to the experiment and explaining what they say and how it doesn't match what the history truth is, and it doesn't match the results of the experiment, and I'm just pointing out how they can't accurately describe the simplest experiments in physics accurately, and yet everybody trusts them to explain complex experiments accurately. But for one, such a claim in itself just reduces down to an argument from authority. For two, this channel earned credibility points in my book after it exposed me brain to some major ideas considering implications, and I'm frankly shocked they aren't more widely addressed or even acknowledged to exist in an average educational institution. I.e., when investigated, the frailty of several prevailing physics interpretations is clear. Yes, the weakness of the evidence is clear. The fact that it's like going to court with, smudgy fingerprints, polluted DNA, blurry photographs, just the worst evidence, and saying, oh, we're going to make the case. And no, you don't have a case. You're just not there yet. And likewise, many popular descriptions are logically highly questionable, even to a layman such as myself. Well, they're questionable to anybody who's rational. If somebody walks up to you and gives you this Santa Claus story, well, yeah, you should be saying, evidence, please. Extraordinary claims, and they are extraordinary, require extraordinary evidence. And I would say, at minimum, ordinary evidence. And they don't even have ordinary evidence. I presume the magnetism and overview playlist in particular, as well as that regarding our magnetic field lines real video, will be quite pertinent to electrical type theory, so to speak. I'm just saying nobody's pointed out how it can't be that way. And clearly it is a physical explanation for which physics doesn't have. All they can do is say virtual photon, and it doesn't even mean anything because that's all they have. They don't have any explanation of attraction and repulsion. They just have an explanation of a carrier, a magical wooey carrier that the angel can choose to push it away, or the angel chooses to drag it close. That's how magical their explanation is. Mostly, though, I'll blow things up with a starter kit I got, trial by fire, maybe learn about electricity in the meantime. P.S. I know long comments are a pain in the ass. Sadly, brevity isn't my strong suit. Well, it wasn't that long. So Jenna says, I remember asking you before why you don't try arguing on physics forums, and you explained to me that this is the sort of shit that happens. Yes, closed-minded snobs. Yeah, they're worse than closed-minded snobs. They're cowards. Looks like the dislike magician is back. Ah, yes, one of the videos had like 73 dislikes. Mom let him out of the basement, and non-life has hit him again. Don't laugh. Wasn't that funny? You can determine a particle's mass by determining its speed. So, it says you. yeah, that's right. It says you. I mean, you have to first recognize that a particle is a silly word if you're going to call everything a particle. So clearly the atomic bits, the elemental bits, electrons and protons, you can't measure them the same way you measure everything else, because they're constantly in a charged field, and the charged field is going to influence their behavior. So it's just kind of silly to say, I'm just going to measure how fast they're going and say I know how much gravity affected them, and therefore I know how much mass they have. You can't use the same rules. I mean, any idiot would know if you lived in steel land and you had a magnet, right? It's going to be really hard to measure how much the magnet weighs. That's how they increase the ratio of 235 versus 238 for nuclear reactor. Yeah. The fact that you can put things in a centrifuge, so to speak, it will work. But I'm just saying it's not going to give you absolute values. It's only going to give you relative values. U238 is heavier, so it moves slower than U235, and it's filterable because of it. Yes. Well, who's arguing? So again, you're using a false premise. I don't know if that's not exactly a straw man, but you know, it's a distraction, a red herring, because they're not measuring absolute mass. So you can determine that a charge is positive based on how it interacts with atoms, and its mass can be determined by its speed. Yeah, you have to have the right assumptions going in, or you're going to get the wrong values going out. And of course, my whole argument is they have very wrong assumptions about mass and velocity when it comes to subatomic particles. You can reject the existence of positrons all you want. Yes, I'll reject the notion that there's any kind of anti-electron. That's right. But if you want to prove contemporary physics wrong, you can't do it by rejecting the existence of a positron. Well, that's not how I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm going to prove the fact that their experiment produces, again, weak evidence. It's not strong evidence of something. It's weak evidence. So the whole existence of this positron is based on plowing radiation through a piece of lead, and then saying the thing that came out was moving. It has the wrong charge and is moving too slow to be, too fast to be a proton. Now, isn't that based on a bunch of assumptions about how they think protons move? How much velocity the proton had when it went in? They didn't measure that velocity. They only measured the velocity going out. So whatever. I mean, if you think that's strong evidence, fine. I don't think it's nail in the coffin kind of evidence. 208. Their math didn't predict dark matter because it didn't work. Haha. I have thought of that a few times, and I still wonder. The physicists act pretty sure about it. Well, how they're sure that their math didn't work, so they're sure they need to have some reason why their math doesn't work. Because their math can't be broken, right? Again, we're based on assumptions. The whole need to create dark matter is based on their fake assumptions that the universe is expanding and that somehow galaxies are collapsing. So they've got it probably backwards. The universe is actually contracting and the galaxies are actually expanding. As ironic as that is, but that's exactly probably the truth of it. They've got it backwards. My mouse is failing to mouse, which means something's going on. Something not good. Yeah. My video card stopped making noise. Something interesting is happening. Isn't it fun? I don't think it is, actually. Come on. These batteries aren't that old. I'm going to be fucking with me. Oh, I got the wrong mouse. Yeah. Alright, anyway. They actually pretty sure. I know a guy with a PhD in physics. I'm text messaging him and seeing if he secretly suspects dark matter is wonky. Ha ha ha. I hope he tells me to piss off. Well, like I said, there's absolutely no corroborating evidence for the existence of any non-material matter stuff. Supermatter, crazy matter, whatever you wooey matter. Alright, so the only evidence is the fact that they don't want to admit they might have a wrong assumption about how galaxies work. I don't understand the point that you're trying to make here. Well, I don't understand what this gibberish is, so it's not a time code. So I'm afraid I can't do anything with that. So again, I've sort of said before, I really hate obscure references like that, so I wish you'd just quote what you don't understand or paraphrase it in some form. 12, again, time codes are just irritating. If you're, without any context, it's just, what, you think I'm really going to go play the video again? I just don't think so. If you're right about everything being in the form of power, you are right, if you're right. I can tell you one admission my physics professor told me once. The definitions of the units of power are circular. They are all referred to one another, and so you can use them in equations, but they aren't solid definitions for the way atoms... Solid definitions the way the atoms are solid definitions. I don't know if atoms are solid definitions, but it's always... The force is, wherever you're looking at it or wherever it's working, is always doing power. Now you can recognize the fact that it has elements of power, which are voltage and current. So you can understand there's two properties to its power when it's in the form of electricity. And when it's in the form of photons flying through the air, you could say it has a density of particles, photons. There's different ways to measure that wattage. Power is a misdefinition. I don't think it's a bad word. I don't think energy is a bad word. I just think it just has to be understood that what it always means is that there's an imbalance, and that's why we're seeing it. I mean, there's power hitting us all the time. We're being hit by a ton of watts of power, but it doesn't mean anything if that, in terms of us seeing it, if the power is against itself. If I'm getting hit by just as much this way as this way, and I'm doing absolutely nothing, there's no evidence of the power. Movement is what power is, right, but the parts moving are all invisible. The only parts really moving are the invisible parts, right? So it is better, I think, to just refer to it all as the end of the comment. I don't know. Anyway, Michael Falwell. Hi, Gary. Hope you're doing well. Today's physics has certainly gone awry. The last 100 years of physics has become over-reliant on the software, whatever. So-called mathematical predictions. Well, the so-called mathematical predictions, again, are not predictions. They're just observations, formalized. Visual representations, animations and simulations. Well, those are a great thing, but again, they're using simulations almost as evidence now, which is really dangerous. The hardware, on the other hand, is where the true facts of the matter reside. If you want to nail in the coffin evidence, then your best bet would be to physically twat that nail in with a big fucking hammer. Yes, the experiments are what's important. They're where the facts are. And you've got to be very careful of trusting interpreters. What is pressure, force, momentum, etc.? Are they particles too? Well, you obviously just don't really care to pay much attention. But I think you could get the drift of it by actually watching just one of my videos. Energy isn't particles like ether isn't particles. Well, fuck you. Just my thoughts. Well, totally irrelevant and unevidenced, so why should I care? All just different labels and metaphors. Well, that's just mush. They're not just different labels and metaphors. They're statements being made, contentions. It won't move. So there is something wrong with the computer. That isn't deleting. Delete. It just won't do it. Maybe this arrow thing will help. Nope. These aren't useful choices. I just want it to go away. Yeah, won't go away. Alright, Jeff, we did that. That's Linux stuff. Alright, the magnetic field can only be seen by a moving observer. You can't see it then either, idiot. If I place two magnets next to each other, alright, in a certain configuration, you'll see. All I have to do is put them on a stick, with a hole in between the two magnets, and I can float one magnet on top of the other. I'm certainly going to see the magnetic field, and nobody's going to be moving. Therefore, it can be interpreted as having a value of 0, even though it is actually present. Fuck you. By Gauss's law, fuck you again, the B can equal 0. Fuck you. In the that's just bullshit. Magnostatic. There's no magnostatics. E can be equal 0. Yeah, the point is that in the stupid Gauss's law and all of Maxwell's crap, all they do is pick one of the fields. That's all. They just say, well, let's just do the math for the E field, or let's do the math for the B field. when we know it's all the same fucking thing. They're just calling it E in one location and they're calling it B when it's in another location. But it's the same thing. You are saying that these conditions cannot be met. I'm not saying anything about that crap. I would agree that an equilibrium of zero, fuck this zero shit, is hard to achieve and maintain. However, it's not impossible. Whatever. What does that even mean? That sounds like something Ken Wheeler would say. An equilibrium of zero. It's just retarded. How would you interpret Kirchhoff's law without a parameter of zero? Again, just more crap. The law just has to do with the fucking voltage, all right? The pressure goes from its maximum to zero through the circuit. It has to. That's the obligation the battery imposes. Fuck. 1 + 1 divided by 1 + oh, this is just such crap. Only credible for equilibrium. There better not be a whole bunch of this shit. Stated as E plus M equals E xm, the left side of the equation supports a zero field while the right side does not. Again, there's only one field. They're just calling it a B or an E. And when it's E, they change the R squared into, they change the R cubed into an R squared because it's only a mono field instead of a dipole field. So this is just all bullshit. If this is compared to Einstein's general relativity question, it would support your theory in the Einstein's theory was based on Maxwell's equation, so no surprise there again, in the context of electromagnetic waves, with 2 as the state of equilibrium, where would still be zero field in a negative position. And example would be plus W plus minus W equals Z boson. Well, fuck this shit. No, enough of this already. Useless drivel. Ugh, didn't delete again. I couldn't replicate that, so that's another Linux thing. Okay, so we're done. Let me just re-upload this, refresh this, or whatever. What's with the Amendum channel? Fuck you. You can't watch the last video posted on the channel where it says Google sucks, and I pointed out how I got a strike on the channel so that the videos are on the Do Not God channel. You're too fucking stupid. Jesus. There's a Steven comment. Well, let me get rid of a couple of this other shitty comments. Now that I'm here, and I can probably delete now. Yeah, let's get rid of this rubbish. And for sure, we'll get rid of this little bit of rubbish. Alright. So he did another one. I've begun assembling a private playlist centering around electronics and basic atomic theory directly relevant to such. I use Control F on the DraftScience website to zero in on the videos relevant to this based on the titles. LOL. Anyhow, thanks Gary for the effort you've invested. Logically sound descriptive model. Yes. Okay. Sorry for the long wait. Again, I didn't have a few snags over in completing, I don't think it completed, but anyway, the transmitter and then running the experiment in a fairly crude fashion. I concede I'm happy to do them again if necessary with any changes. However, whatever it takes to reach a conclusion everyone can be happy with. Well, obviously my detractors will be perfectly happy with the crappy experiment you did, but yeah, I'm not satisfied. Any volunteers to take up the challenge are welcome. As I confess, I'm not necessarily the best person to do these tests. I am learning as I go. I've missed out on your and Hothiday's recent exchanges. I've been busy editing the otherwise tedious videos of me tinkering with the wires and metal smear over the usual. The video links here is of a comp string of short videos till, yeah, right. I'm subscribed to your channel, Steve. You don't have to let me know when you make a video. I'll know. But I also intend to follow it with a related video of sound experiments I did last year, which I have also been busy editing down to several tedious hours. Anyway, these should be interesting to anyone with a generous sound wave phenomenon and with 4x intensity aspect. Well, the 4x part is interesting, yes. Energy in a wave being proportional to the square of the amplitude. Here's your proof it applies to sound waves, and therefore I presume all wave phenomenon. Well, again, I don't even know what all wave phenomenon would mean. Again, it's waves are in mediums. Waves happen in water and sound. Yes, they have some things in common. Atmosphere, mediums. But light's not the same thing. Some will no doubt say this is evidence that EM spectrum is therefore a wave phenomenon. I don't see why, but that is a simplistic view and the kind of reasoning that got us into this mess in the first place. Well, the thing that gets people into a mess is this whole the mess is made by not recognizing what happens when you take a frequency on off of a certain intensity and then convert it into a sound wave. You add a whole bunch of extra stuff to it. But anyway, there's no point in getting into that. But that is a simplistic view and the kind of reason that got us into this mess in the first place. Well, anyway, I don't know what mess we're in, but whatever. I have lots more interesting videos to follow up with as soon as possible, but even now I am being called away, so finding time isn't always easy. Look forward to it, though. Thank you for letting me test out your theory thus far. And to anyone bothering to watch my quite long videos, which require a degree of commitment and patience that not many people have these days, Steve. Yeah, well, whatever. Like I said, if you're not interested, just say you're not interested. Let's not play around. Then I'll find somebody else, or I'll do it myself. But Oakley doke. So I don't know if there's anything else of interest. Hathaway's made a couple of videos, but they're rather boring, frankly. It's just, wishy-washy. Quantum mechanics doesn't know how to use vocabulary. Well, yeah, okay, we all know that. It's probably worthy of a separate subject, just the whole Allen aspect bullshit, quantum entanglement, horseshit experiments, that are, again, theoretically in trouble because of their presumptions. Most of them are done with using polarizing filters, and they don't even have science for that. They don't know how they work or how they function, and so it's just like the half-silvered mirror in the Michelson-Morley experiment and the assumption that it creates two equal beams, when logically it can't. It's impossible for it to create two equal beams. It's impossible. Now, whether the inequality matters, well, I think it does. Oh, well, here's some Hathaway videos when he's playing with test equipment, I guess. They don't look like Hathaway videos for whatever reason, but we'll see. It's kind of a fancy oscilloscope he's got, if that's his. So, yeah, I'll have to watch those. Alright. So, anyway. We'll just see what happens next. Again, the experiment to do is the simplest one. Shoot as much good energy just to the simplest antenna possible, and just measure voltage if you can. But anyway, we'll see what gets done. So till the next time, and such and so forth and whatnot. Yeah, I think that's enough. Oakley doke.